Welcome back to another episode of 60 Plus Uncensored. I'm Seb Fry, and in this episode we have two guests. We have Joy Jones and Tom Adams, and they together wrote a book called A Marriage That Changed the World, Lois and Bill Wilson and the Addiction Recovery Movement. And you may not know who Bill Wilson is. I sure didn't, but he is the guy who started AA, and both Tom and Joy were themselves in AA, and that's how they met. And they ended up teaming together to write this book, which has been very well received and will be of great interest to many, many of our listeners here on 60 Plus Uncensored. What's going on, guys?
Well, we have a message about a marriage that changed the world. That's the title of our book, and it's about Bill and Lois Wilson, who are co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon, the family group that supports people who have problems with addictions. And this was actually Tom's idea. I was a big cheerleader when he first told me about it because he was writing about the marriage. Typically, when we hear about a great leader, we think of one man forging ahead by himself, when the reality is that there are lots of people doing key things without whom that man could not do whatever it is he has achieved. And that's especially true regarding his wife. And Lois was not just the little lady behind the great man, but a leader in her own right. So when Tom told me about this project, I was like, oh, yes, great idea.
Well, maybe before we talk about the project, we talk about like you guys, like who are you guys, and how do you guys like know each other, and how did this idea for the book come around?
I'll let Tom start that story.
Yep. So we're both people in recovery in 12-step programs of one kind or another. And we've known each other in a writing group. Basically, we got to know each other in a writing group. And I had begun researching this back in the 90s. I was going through a rough period in my life, and I decided that reading young adult literature was a lot easier than reading adult literature, and it was emotionally soothing. And so I started reading a bunch of it. And I was doing biographies, and I noticed there was nothing about the founders of AA or Al-Anon, and I couldn't believe it. Millions of people's lives have changed. Time magazine declared Bill Wilson one of the top 100 people of the century, and yet there's no biography for young people to learn about this guy. So I began doing research and was working on it, and then life intervened and I put it aside. And so when I retired, I wanted to do writing, and I was in this writers group, and I was talking about what I might write about, and was talking about the Wilsons and the marriage. And Joy had a one-person market study she had done. She went to a meeting, and somebody said, and she said, this friend of mine is working on this book about marriage. She says, well, can I get a copy? And she said, well, it's not quite ready yet. She said, well, let me know when it's ready. And based on that, Joy's been enthusiastic ever since. And so we're just trying to find that one person so we can get our sale.
It always starts with one, right?
Exactly.
It always starts with one.
But so what excited me about this book is in my own family and in thousands of people that I know's families, addictions go from generation to generation, and that it's like a thief in the night. It just comes in and it steals things from families. It's a family disease, and it takes things away. And there's just so much ignorance about it out in the world, and so much denial. Our culture really does not like to know about limits, and that less is really more, and that sometimes we can't have everything we want. And addictions, 15 or 20% of the people have a brain change that it's a progressive disease. Is going to get worse, and they're going to die if they don't deal with it. So when you're in college and you're binge drinking, maybe you'll get over it and go get a job when you graduate, or maybe it's the beginning of the rest of the demise of your life. And we don't have ways to really talk to people about that and say, hey, you've got some choices ahead of you, and you need to be aware of some things. And so that's really what compelled me to be interested in this book and about these people, because there's a lot to be learned from them.
Right on. And so what year was this? You said you got the idea in the 90s? Is that,
Initially in the
did I hear that
90s,
right?
late 90s, and I began working 8 years ago on the actual research. And it's a well-researched book. There are 3 or 4 major sources of material. One is the Stepping Stones, is where Bill and Lois Wilson actually lived, and it's like a museum. You can see the houses that existed when they lived in it, and you can also, and all their archives are there. And they were both prolific writers. Lois kept a diary much of her life, and all the correspondence is there. So you can go there and see it and learn about them. Alcoholics Anonymous General Service Office has an archives, and you can go there with permission and can look at all his writings and all the official documents. There's a place called Dr. Bob's Home in Akron, Ohio. Dr. Bob was the co-founder of AA with Bill Wilson, and you can go there and learn about him. And then his papers are on a university website. And so a lot of places you can go to really learn about them, as well as interviewing people. They were born in the late 1800s, so not a lot of people alive who know them, but there are people who know them, and kind of you can kind of work your way back.
Right. So you got this idea in the 90s and you started working on it 8 years ago. So Joy, when did you come into the picture? Did you come into the picture in the late 90s, or are you
Well,
uh,
he told me about it when he first had the idea, and I was excited about the prospect of him doing this book. And somewhere along the way, he says, "Why don't you work on it with me?" And I was a little reluctant, but somehow he twisted my arm and got me on board. Uh, Tom is a facts and figures kind of person, and I'm the color commentary kind of person. So I did some of the storytelling aspect of telling about Bill and Lois and their journey, and Tom was the researcher.
so are do either one of you have like a like were you English majors in college, or like where does where did the writing background come from, you guys? Or is this like a completely new thing? You guys never wrote together or never wrote anything separately before and just picked it up out of the blue, or was this like a natural progression for either one of you?
Well, for me, I knew I wanted to be a writer in third grade. This has been a long-standing desire for me to write, and I call myself a promiscuous writer because I love everything: poetry, prose, nonfiction, fiction, journalistic writing, op-eds, children's books, performance poetry, anything spanning the written or spoken word. I like to do it, and so I've been a writer all my life.
So why don't you
So the
And
Bill and
Tom?
Lois
she can
Project is
humbly
just
tell
one
you
more.
she's published 6 books. So she's
Okay.
a known
She's a
writer.
pro, let's just say.
Yeah,
Yes, she's a pro.
exactly.
And so you, Tom, so this was your first book.
Second book,
Oh, this was your second book.
right.
Okay. All right. So, and so when did you get into writing? In third grade also, or was that like a new avocation for you?
So I was a little slower to the party here. Uh, I, as I mentioned to you before we started, I worked in the nonprofit world all my life, and that meant raising money. And so I had to write a lot of grant proposals. Uh, and I did better in graduate school than I did in undergraduate, because in graduate school, mostly you wrote papers. And so I didn't really fully appreciate it until I got a little older and people said, well, you're a pretty good writer. And then I began writing articles around leadership transitions in the 90s, probably 1990s, and writing professionally. And then at a certain point, I had this consulting company, and I knew that if I kept working, I'd never get a chance to really write. And I used to think about Grandma Moses. Uh, she didn't start painting until she was in her 70s or so. And so I had this picture of myself starting writing late in life. And so that's really, I've written all along, but I'm enjoying it really as a second career, if you would, now.
Right on. And so you guys, you say you met in recovery, is that right? Did I get that part
Right.
correct? So are you guys in the same city? You guys live in the same town, or and you just happened to see each other at a meeting one day, or how did that unfold?
I live in Washington, D.C., and Tom lives in a suburb of Washington, D.C. So we live in the same region. And I think Tom grew up outside of Baltimore. That's correct, right?
Right. Right. So,
Yeah, I'm a lifelong Washingtonian.
and we went to some similar meetings. Yes.
And so you just ran into each other literally. You guys sat next to each other in like in a circle. Like, I mean, I've never been to AA. Like, my dad is an alcoholic, and like I used to drink a lot, and I quit like 5 years ago in the pandemic. Just one day, I was like, you know what, I'm over it, and never looked back. It's kind of weird, but so I mean, I kind of like know alcoholism. You know, I'm part Russian, right? You know, so I'm kind of familiar with the topic. Um, so but how did you guys like meet at the meeting? Was it just like, is there like a group of writers at AA? I imagine there's a lot of writers who are alcoholics. I would just imagine, right? You
I
know,
don't
there's like a,
remember my first meeting with Tom. I don't remember, we would see each other around, and at some point we must have exchanged telephone numbers and talked with each other. But I can't remember the initial time when we began our friendship. We had another friend in common who has been a big inspiration to us. In fact, we have her in the book as part of the dedication. Her name was Doris, and she sort of helped us. The three of us had a synergy between us that fostered all the interconnected relationships. But I can't tell you the first day I met Tom. I don't. Do you remember Tom?
No, I think we were in similar. There are a variety of 12-step programs, and so it's not all just AA. And so we had one program where uh, we went and saw each other, and then there's one that is to help artists fully embrace their creativity. And I think we met there, and through that we we began meeting with another friend in kind of an informal writing group. And I'd say that's where we got to know
okay.
each other.
All right, very, very good. And so, so Tom, but you had the idea first for the book, and what was it about? I mean, was there anything really about their story, or just the fact that no one had really ever told their story before that really drew you to it?
Well, at first it seemed like it was untold. And as I got into it more, I was very curious about the marriage and about what kind of marriage it really was and how they, uh, yeah, really what, how they did or didn't cooperate with one another. In other words, were they two people on parallel paths who just happened to do some good in the world? Or was there really a love and a marriage and a unity? And I didn't know the answer to that. And if you hang around 12-step rooms, you'll hear all kinds of rumors about Bill. Uh, and then and you also will hear people with very wide ranges of opinions about Lois. She was very much underappreciated and misunderstood. And but I think the primary thing as we got into it, that nowhere is the story of the individual recovery and the family recovery in one place. And that's what our book does. One of the tensions between Joy and I as we went through it was, as she said, she was very excited about the marriage. And, I thought that was a great topic, but I was more interested in how it changed the world, because that's what my goal is, change the world. And so how do these people change the world? What can we learn from them that helps us change the world so not so many people suffer and we have a more loving and kind world?
Okay, right on. So, I understand that, well, actually, one question is, were either one of them like an alcoholic or a drug addict, or was one of them a drug addict, the other one was not?
Bill was the alcoholic. Lois was not. And the first 17 years of their marriage, she had to cope with a husband who was just off the wall drinking. She One story that blew my mind. He was a smart man, very creative, very intelligent, and he went to law school. And the particular law school he went to, you weren't considered a graduate unless you attended the commencement ceremony. You could not get your law degree unless you went to graduation. And the day of graduation, he got drunk, never showed up, so he never got his degree. And that just blew my mind to go through all those years of law school, do all the work, and then you don't show up for commencement, and then don't try to go back and negotiate with the dean or the staff or the faculty to get your degree. So, all of that work thrown out the window. So, but that's just a very minor thing. And one of the things that did make me curious is, why did Lois stay? Like I said, 17 years of him disappointing her, 17 years of bad behavior, 17 years of working and then not working, and then working and then not working. And then when he got sober, he still didn't work. After he got sober, he never really had a steady job after that, because he was so excited about helping other people recover from alcohol. So he spent his time evangelizing, spreading the message. And so you wonder, was she crazy? Was she that in love? Was she devoted and committed to the cause? What kept her in the marriage? And so that was a compelling question for me.
To go back to who was the alcoholic. So you mentioned your father and your own experience. I don't know if you can recall the progression of the disease. For people that have what they call now a substance use disorder, there's a point where you lose the power of choice. You might say to yourself, I'm going to just have 2 or 3 drinks, but that becomes impossible. You can't stop. There's a phenomenon of craving that's set up because your brain is sending you different signals than the average person. The average person begins to feel themselves becoming a little bit incapacitated, and they say, oh, I better stop. The alcoholic says, oh, I need some more of that. And it gets progressive. So in Bill's case, he got to the point where he had hallucinations, where he wanted to jump out the window. He was in a treatment center 3 times. The 3rd time is when he got sober. Lois, like most spouses of people with drinking problems or other addictions, thought she could change him. She was convinced that her love would be more than enough to change him. And she was confident of that. And so she had all these schemes. She would take him on hikes out in the country. They were from Vermont, or she was from Brooklyn and he was from Vermont, but her family had a home up in Vermont. And she would take him on long hikes. She would take him camping. She did all kinds of things to try to keep him sober. And he could stay sober for a few days, but he could not stay sober. And she could not make that change. And in our book, we have love letters between them. Clearly they loved each other very deeply. And we have the pain letters of how painful it was for him to have this disease and not be able to stop, and for her to want so desperately to help him and think that she could, and be unsuccessful over and over again.
So what year did they get married, by the way? When did this actually happen?
1918. They got married right before World War I started. He was in a military school. They had to make the wedding a couple weeks early because he was being called up. He ended up, shortly after they were married, he was sent up to New England to get ready to go overseas. And then he went and spent time in England and France. He was in the war for less than a year because it ended not too long after he got in. But his drinking really took off over there. He thought it was wonderful that the people in Europe liked wine and brandy and whiskey. He had a great time.
I see. So there was actually rehab even back like in 1920 when he came back. Is that what you're saying? I kind of surprised that they really even had
rehab.
that
There was hospitals that dealt with
hospitals.
Alcohol and drug and mental health issues. It was called Towns Hospital in Manhattan. It was one of the few around the country. His wife came from a fairly affluent family. Her father was a doctor, her brother was a doctor, and her brother helped her get help for Bill.
I see. And so, so when she married him, she knew that he liked to drink, but maybe that wasn't really seen as very unusual. And I don't think it's very unusual today either. But it didn't really become later until after he came back from the war. Did he actually fight in the war? Did he have like PTSD that might have like contributed to that, or
Nothing
no?
significant. I mean, yeah, no. I mean, he
No, huh? So he just got drinking like in Europe, because in Europe they drink a lot. I mean, especially like in England. In England they drink a hell of a lot.
He was in France, so
Oh, he's in
England
France.
and France,
yes,
but
but he's French like
yeah,
wine.
his drinking. So uh, like you, his father was an alcoholic, uh, and his grandfather was an alcoholic. His grandfather used religion and stopped one day on his own. His father divorced his mother when he was 7 or 8. He worked in a marble quarry and took him for a ride and said, "I'm leaving." And uh, then his mother abandoned him and went to Boston to go to school to become a physiatrist. Very uncommon for that period of time, the early 20th century. And he was raised by his grandparents. He went off to a boarding school. His grandfather couldn't figure out how to get him out of this depression about the divorce. So he thought maybe getting him to a school would help him. And he had this drive to excel, and he fell in love. And the young 16-year-old girl that he loved had a minor health issue and went back to New York to get an operation and died on the operating table. And they came into the study hall at the school and announced that, and he was crushed and went into another depression. Uh, and so his life was just this yearning, this emptiness for this hole in his soul, and feeling not fitting in until he met Lois. And Lois became kind of the antidote to that.
Sort of an
Yeah,
antidote to
yeah,
that,
yeah.
right? I
He
mean,
complemented that with
was it?
alcohol. Right?
I mean, was she an enabler essentially? I mean, today we would call an enabler. Was that kind of her role? I mean, like she's an antidote, right? I mean, I hear enabler when I hear
Uh,
antidote.
yeah, was she an enabler? Uh, yes, she was she didn't enable his drinking in the sense of but she believed that she could get him to stop. And so Joy can comment about kind of why she stuck with him, which is a complex question in itself.
Okay,
So,
Joy, why did she stick with him?
okay, I think she had several reasons. Some of them are healthy reasons, and some of them are not. She was definitely codependent. She was just very much meshed into Bill and his whole life. And so some of that enmeshment was not good. Like I said, she was codependent. So that was one reason why she stuck around. Two, I think she actually genuinely loved him. She cared for him. I remember listening to an interview, and the interviewer asks her, when he would get drunk, didn't you want to leave him? Didn't you want to kick him out? And she says, I couldn't stay mad at him too long because I saw how remorseful he was. And I saw that he really was out of control. He really didn't want to do this and he couldn't help himself. And I felt my heart went out to him. I just couldn't remain angry, seeing how he was suffering with the drink. So she genuinely loved him. She was raised a Christian, and her particular religious instruction emphasized love and service. And so she wanted to be helpful. She didn't want to throw in the towel on somebody. She didn't want to give up on somebody who she cared about. And then thirdly, I think she had a divine assignment. I think she, she was called to work out that love and service as part of her journey in life. And because she didn't just suffer and grin and bear it, she, as I said, she was very active in helping him establish Alcoholics Anonymous, and then very active in being the co-founder of Al-Anon, the group for family members of alcoholics. So she wasn't just suffering in silence. She was active and busy doing good
And her
work.
parents, her mother and father, were unusual for the time in that they had a very openly affectionate marriage. They cared for each other, and Lois knew it. Lois was the oldest of their family. And her mother was concerned. She got cancer and was on her deathbed and had a conversation with Lois saying, look, I know that I've taught you to love and forgive. And that's really important. But it's also important that you feel like you've lived your own life. And so I don't want you to regret anything you're doing. I want you to feel the freedom to do what you need to do. Those are my words, not exactly hers, but that was the message. And she decided to stay. And one of the things that's hard for people that aren't familiar with 12 steps to understand is what is meant by a spiritual awakening in the 12 steps. You know, the 12th step is having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. And Bill Wilson had the first spiritual awakening for the 12-step movement as the founder. And his was what's called a white light experience. He just felt like he had a vision, and it stayed with him all his life. It gave him the power. He never went to church. He didn't have a particular religion, but he prayed and sought guidance from a higher power every day. And he lived a spiritual way of life. There's a prayer called the St. Francis prayer, which you may have heard of that about being an instrument of peace. He prayed that prayer every day, all the time. And so he had a spiritual awakening. But on your point about enabling and codependency, Lois also had a spiritual awakening. After Bill got sober, they were going to what preceded the AA meetings, the Oxford group meeting, and Bill says, "Come on, Lois, we got to get out the door here." And Lois picked up a shoe and threw it at him and said, "Damn your old meetings." And she couldn't figure out why she was so angry with him. He was sober. That's what she wanted all her life, their marriage. And so she reflects, and in our book, we talk about how her friends helped her to see that she'd never relied on a higher power. She always thought she could fix this herself, and she needed to have a higher power. And she had her own spiritual awakening, and that allowed her to help all the other spouses of alcoholics. If you can imagine the spouses of the early members of AA sitting around in a room, what would they talk about? They would talk about all the harm their husbands had done to them and how bad their lives were. Except that didn't happen after Lois and Ann Smith and Akron had their spiritual awakenings. They said, we have to work these same 12 steps that have been developed for AA. And they began doing that. And so they began talking about their own change, about their own process of healing from the effects of alcoholism. They say that in Al-Anon that sometimes the spouse of an alcoholic gets sicker than the alcoholic themselves in their efforts to control and to fix it.
So, go on, Joy.
One of the people who interviewed us made an interesting comment. He himself had struggled with alcohol addiction as a young man, and he had been married. And he said, while I was married, I'm very grateful for my wife keeping things together while I was out drinking. But there were several things she was doing that were not cool at all. But because she wasn't drinking, nobody ever gave any credence to when I said, well, she's doing this and she's doing that. And the marriage eventually broke up, and he's able to forgive her. But there were ways that his wife was just as sick as he was, except that she was able to look good better than he was.
Well, so you guys have been through AA and I guess Al-Anon too, or not Al-Anon, just AA?
So
I've
We
been
have a
to
principle of anonymity.
12-step
Uh,
meetings of a large range because I'm just
yeah, so the principle of anonymity, we don't disclose specific.
Oh, principle of
Yeah,
anonymity.
but we can say that we're both veterans of 12-step programs, and we know of have experience with Al-Anon
Oh,
and AA.
okay. Because my question isn't about you. It's about people in general. So uh, like a lot of times, like you hear like, oh, my husband's an alcoholic, and people say, well, why don't you just leave him? So, and I imagine that a lot of people who are listening to this, because alcoholism is rampant. I don't know what percentage of people are alcoholic, but it's a lot, right? 20%. I don't know, 10. I mean, it's a lot. Even if it's 10%, I think it's more than that. That's, many, many millions of people. They're going through this. And what advice can you guys share for those people who are struggling with that question? Should I stay or should I go? And you can tie it back to maybe a lesson that came through the book that you guys wrote.
Well, the woman who became the co-founder of Al-Anon was named Anne Bingham. Uh, Her husband was a guy named DeVoe. Uh, they lived in New York, on not far from where Bill and Lois lived. And DeVoe had a car dealership, and he was someone who didn't drink at all, and then he started, and he was a binge drinker, and so he would go out for be gone for periods of time. So his wife ran the business. She was first the accountant, and then when he was gone, she would run it, and she did all these things. And she uh, was ready to give up on him. She actually left him for a while. Uh, and then she got involved with Lois and with Al-Anon, and they were able to stay together. And what Al-Anon did for her and does for everybody who comes to it is it teaches you that you can't change the person with the drinking problem, you can't control them, and you can't cure them. But what you can do is focus on yourself. And by changing yourself, uh, you can detach with love. You can separate the illness and the behavior that comes out of the illness from the person. And so you can learn to detach with love. So one of the stories in Al-Anon is about the woman whose husband falls out of bed every night because he's drunk, rolls over and so when she gets up to go to the bathroom, she walks around him, and she's telling somebody else in Al-Anon how proud she is of this behavior, that I just go around him. I don't do anything. And she says, well, that's not exactly detaching with love. And so the next night she gets up and she takes a blanket and puts it on him, and then she goes around him. And so it's figuring out what is it, how do we care for people, but let them have the consequences of their actions and let us focus on ourselves and our own recovery. Because as Joy said, we've gotten sick by trying to help somebody and control them. We become more controlling. We become more fearful. Most addictions, they say, the science tells us today, come out of trauma of some kind. And so the trauma teaches us to be fearful. I've felt that in my own life. If you looked at my family, it looks like an ordinary run-of-the-mill, lower middle class, working class family. But the things that happened, it caused me to be afraid. And because of my fear, I decided that the best way for me to cope with that fear was to try to control things. And it's taken me years to let go of being afraid and to not feel a need to control every situation and just be in the moment. When people say, be here now, it's like, wow, yeah, what does that mean? Can you really trust the now?
Well, yes, because that's all you have is now. So you have to trust it. You
Yeah.
have no choice but to trust the now. So, Joy, what do you think?
One thing that I think is helpful to anybody uh, grappling with a difficult problem is something that Ann Smith, Dr. Bob's wife. Dr. Bob was the person who joined Bill in co-founding Alcoholics Anonymous. Ann was a big proponent of what she called quiet time. Every morning, she would sit, do some sort of spiritual reading and then sit quietly and make herself open to divine guidance. And she allowed that to direct a lot of her behavior with not just her husband, but with other people. Uh, this year marks 90 years of AA's inception, and we went to Akron, where it was founded, to be part of the festivities this year. And one of the archivists told a story where one morning Anne was sitting in her quiet time, and she got a strong leading that somebody was going to come by the house later that morning. And her husband was like, we need to go to the store or wherever. And she was like, no, I got a very clear guidance that somebody's coming past the house. I don't want to leave the home and miss this person. And so they hung around the house, and sure enough, somebody came with an important need, and they were able to minister to that person. And so to be able to be that in alignment with God's will, to be able to be that attuned to your intuition, to be able to be that receptive to the message that will help you solve the problems that you are confronting with, is a very powerful tool for having a more effective and productive life. And so you will have an idea of what to do or what not to do regarding your drinking spouse or your wayward teenager or your curmudgeonly boss, whatever the problem is. Quiet time is helpful in that regard. And for my own self, years ago, I used to do a quiet time every morning, and somewhere over the time I stopped. But in working with Tom, who does a quiet time every day, and then in reading about Bill and Lois and Ann and Bob, who did quiet time every day, I've reinstituted that practice into my own life again.
All right. And so, Tom, you said you wanted to write this book because you wanted to change the world or help the world. And how do you think that writing this book has done that?
When Bill and Lois were both alive, they were actively working together for both recovery for the individual and the family. And when Lois died in 1988, there wasn't that bridge between AA and Al-Anon, and while there's cooperation between the programs, for a variety of reasons, they tend to get isolated like any large institution. And so the only way we're going to stop the flow of this from one generation to another is to pay attention to both individual and family recovery. And so the book allows people to read about that and understand that, allows Joy and I to talk to people about that and to see if there isn't there are definitely ways to expand attention to individual and family recovery. The other thing the book allows is the subtitle for the book is Lois and Bill Wilson and A Marriage That Changed the World, and the addiction recovery movement. And there is a movement that came out of this that's much bigger than the 12-step movement. There are what's called multiple pathways now. Different. Not everybody believes you have to stop drinking forever. It's your own experience. You have an experience of stopping drinking for a period of time. And so the book is intended to open up and overcome some of the biases that exist in the medical and mental health fields against 12-step movements. There's been a lot of research in the last 10 years that proves the effectiveness of AA and 12-step programs. There's a Cochrane study that's kind of the top class, blue ribbon class, that says that AA is effective. And so there's no reason for doctors and mental health people and social workers not to refer people to one of these pathways to get help. And there are multiple addictions. I mean, obesity is one of the fastest growing health problems in our country. Look at the gambling ads on television today and tell me there won't be a pandemic of people with gambling and debt problems because of gambling. And all that comes out of addiction, comes out of trauma. and we don't have a community conversation about that. We like to live in denial. And so this book is say, let's have a community conversation about it. What can we do differently so that my children and your children and the grandchildren have a different world around this and have different understandings?
All right. Okay, great. And so, Joy, you said you wanted to write the book because you liked the love story. Is that did I remember that right?
Well, not so much the love story, but the idea that more than one person is necessary for any significant change to take place. So you're sitting here with us, Seb, doing the podcast, and someone can say, "Oh, isn't Seb clever for doing this broadcast?" And you
I
are
don't think
clever.
anyone's saying that.
But there's probably somebody who gives you emotional support. There's somebody, when you went to the grocery store to buy your food, to prepare your breakfast so you would have the energy to show up today. You might have driven from one location to another. Somebody made the car. So we have to thank Mr. General Motors or Mr. Ford for providing you with the car. There are lots of people who we don't see on the podcast who are directly responsible for you being able to do what you do. And so uh, I like the idea of acknowledging and thanking those people when we tell the story of anybody's success. It's not a one-man operation. There's thousands and thousands and well, maybe not thousands and thousands, but certainly multiples of people who are necessary for anything to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like when Obama said, like you didn't build that, talking to people who like, thought that they were amazing, and he was saying, well, you didn't build the road, you didn't build the power plant, right? I mean, like
Exactly.
no one succeeds alone, right? I mean, everyone succeeds in a, in a larger environment where many
Exactly.
other people have worked very hard for decades or centuries, oftentimes, to, create the opportunity for so and so to succeed. I'm not sure where Tom went, um,
Modern
but
technology.
technology. Well, hopefully he'll be back here before too long.
Okay.
But I was going to ask, especially Tom, I was going to ask, this is 60 plus uncensored, and it's for the older adult crowd. And Tom himself is an older adult. You don't look very old. Are you much younger than Tom? I mean, you don't.
I'm 70 years old.
No way, you're not. No, are
Which
you
is a
really?
gold star for saying that. But yes, I'm 70.
No way. Oh my God, you look fantastic. Okay, great. Well, let me ask you this then. I mean, a lot of people deal with addiction into their 70s, right? In their 60s, right? In 80s. And like I think a lot of people just think that, like, oh, there's no point in changing. It's just too late for me, right? I mean, maybe you've heard that before. It's just too late for me. Like I've been an alcoholic for 40 or 50 years now. Like this is who I am. What advice do you have to people who feel that way, maybe after such a long time being an addict?
Oh, to repeat the cliche is almost never too late. Every day is an opportunity to start anew. One of the slogans is that the person with the longest sobriety is only the person who woke up earliest this morning, not because you have many years behind you. It's just one day at a time and doing what it takes to be successful for today. Uh, yes, habits are hard to break. Yes, it's scary doing something new, but that helps to make life exciting and worth living. To try something new, to face your fears, to see what God is going to do today. You'll be astounded sometimes. Sometimes happily so, sometimes less so. But it keeps life interesting and keeps life as an adventure and not a dull routine. So show
Have
up,
you seen a lot
show up and see what happens.
Have you seen a lot of people be successful with it, like later in life? I mean, like, because a lot of times, like, okay, well, like, I don't want to be a shitty grandparent to my kid, to my grandson, like I was to my kid, right? I mean, like,
Hmm.
so do you actually see people being able to change those patterns successfully? And is that rare or is that common?
I really don't think age is the critical factor. I think being ready to make a change is more important than how old you are or how young you are. I think so one benefit of being older is that even if you've had a lot of mistakes in life, you've learned a lot, you've seen a lot. And so you bring that wisdom with you to anything that you do going forward. So actually being older can be helpful. Sometimes if you're 20 and someone says, you need to change, you need to stop drinking, or you need to do something different, or you need, don't give your phone number to that man, or don't ask that woman out. And you think they're old, they don't know what they're talking about. And then you get into the situation and like, you find out, oh, maybe I should have listened. Whereas when you're older, you might be a little bit more teachable, perhaps. So,
Well, I find that a lot of things get easier as I get older. Really, a great many things actually are easier. Things are clearer to me now than they were like 30 years ago. Certainly, really, So it's just that you hear so many people give that like self-defeatist sort of like internalized ageism, like you can't teach a old dog new tricks. But you're, but it sounds like you're not buying that.
no, old dogs can learn new tricks.
All right. So we're kind of getting towards the end of our time here, and is there any advice that you want to give to people who are want to recover? I mean, like, what they just go to a meeting, or what should they do for people who are in that place, or in Lois's place, or Bill's place? Like, what advice can you leave us with?
I definitely go to a meeting. The first time I went to a meeting, I was curious. I had heard someone say that Alcoholics Anonymous was closer to what God had in mind for the church than what the church is. And I was very into church at the time. And I was like, what could a bunch of drunks know that Christians don't know? And so I went, and I was blown away by the honesty I heard in the room about the very real and compelling stories that people told. And there's a very good chance that the exact thing you need to hear will be spoken when you go to the room. So I would recommend that you do that. The other thing I want to say is I want to show people what the book looks like in case they decide to check it out. So this is A Marriage That Changed the World, in case you want to take a closer look at it. So,
Is there an Audible book version of that too, or is it on
not
Kindle,
yet.
or
Maybe, Seb, we can get you to be the voice for the book.
I can read it? I don't know. I mean, I give it a try. Sure. I love audiobooks.
I
I
love
don't.
audiobooks too.
And
Yeah.
yes,
And
there is an ebook, a Kindle version of it.
That's not an audiobook.
No, but he also has
no, no,
other
no.
ebooks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other formats. So Tom, do you have any advice you want to leave with us for people maybe who are like, because our 60 plus uncensored is for an older crowd, right? So like the question is like, if you've been an alcoholic and you're 60 or 70 or 80 years old and you believe you can't change, what advice would you give to somebody in that situation, or somebody who's married to somebody like that? Any last words for those folks?
Well, I would broaden your audience a little bit just by saying that 67% of people in Al-Anon report that they have alcoholism in their family over multiple generations. And so there are people all around, alcoholism can skip a generation and then the impact shows up in the next generation. So I would encourage all your readers to become knowledgeable because it's just everywhere. Addictions are everywhere, and they need to become knowledgeable. Obviously, we have a bias that our book would help them become knowledgeable. We'd love for them to read it, and they can get it on Amazon or at local bookstores. But however you want to get educated, and in that education, to stay open. You'll hear the word God, and it scares some people away. And they're secular atheists in 12-step programs. There are programs for people who have no faith. There are people whose faith is everything to them, called Celebrate Recovery. So there's all kinds of different approaches. And so just because what you hear the first time you go to a meeting doesn't sound, make your heart sing, it doesn't mean that this isn't going to work for you. You need to go to enough meetings to listen and find a professional to kind of guide you to what's going to fit with your personality. But you can't run away from this. If you're in a relationship with someone with an addiction of some kind, it's going to get worse. And if you have an addiction and you can't control it, it's going to get worse. And so it's just a question of how much devastation do you want to wreak in your life, and how much do you want to watch, and when do you get help? And I need help are the hardest words for most of us. We're a very self-reliant nation. And in this arena, self-reliance doesn't work.
All right, very good. Okay, and so I happen to know that your book is on Amazon.com. And do you guys have like a website though that you use for marketing the book or marketing each other? I mean, do you guys do speaking engagements, or where can people go to like get a hold of you guys if they want to like talk more and
No.
have you guys maybe, to talk about your book or anything else?
So
We each have websites. Mine is joyjonesonline.com.
and
Okay.
mine is thadams.com. thadams.com. And we both.
And are you guys speakers on the speaker circuit? Like, do you guys go and go around and give talks, or?
Yes, we do.
All right, very, very good.
We
Okay, you
also
guys
have
ever come out to the
Facebook
West Coast
pages.
ever?
Joy, you want to tell them the Facebook page?
The Facebook page is Lois and Bill Wilson Marriage.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on to 60 Plus Uncensored and sharing a little bit about yourselves and the project that you guys have worked on. It sounds like a tremendous book, and I'm sure it really has helped and will help to a lot of people who are, facing these kinds of challenges in their lives.
Thank you, Seb.
Thank you for having us.
Great to be with you.
All right, guys. It's a pleasure. Okay, I'll catch you on the flip side.
Bye-bye.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of 60 Plus Uncensored. Huge thanks to Joy Jones and Tom Adams for setting the tone with such honesty and insight. Now, if you like this episode, do me a favor and then do Tom and Joy a favor. Hit the subscribe button, leave a review, and then share it with someone you know who needs to hear it. And there is someone out there you know who really needs to hear this one. And by the way, if you happen to know anyone who is over 60, who's still out there doing big things like writing books and living boldly and working with purpose, or just aging on their own terms, I would love to hear from you. Reach out to me at team60plus.com or join the conversation at 60 Plus Uncensored on Reddit. I'm Seb Fry, and this is 60 Plus Uncensored, because as we're learning, life after 60 isn't the end, it's just getting good.
Subscribe now